Welcome back to another episode of Bitfinex Talks. I'm your host, Ricardo Martinez. Today, my guest is Nishant Sharma, who is the founder and CEO of BlocksBridge. Nishant, thank you so much for accepting the interview and taking time out of your day to come on the show and let me pepper you with a bunch of questions. How are you today?
Very good. Thanks for having me, Ricardo. Excited to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Nishant, the first question that I have is for the people that don't know that may be listening in, what exactly is BlocksBridge?
So BlocksBridge is a consulting firm that advises C-level executives of companies, especially in the Bitcoin mining industry, on communication strategy. In simple words, we are a PR firm for Bitcoin mining companies. And we also produce research on publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies under the banner of theminermag.com. Some of your viewers who buy stocks of companies that are traded on NASDAQ and mine Bitcoin may be familiar with the Miner Mag that provides, for now, free content on which companies are doing what, and also provide some in-depth analysis on what stocks could be better to buy. The decision has to be made by the viewers, but we provide the data.
So I guess my second follow-up question is, what is the current state of Bitcoin mining? I know it's been a bear market. It's been grueling. The miners may or may not be close to capitulation. What's the mining industry's health at the moment?
The mining industry has, of course, seen better days, but I wouldn't say it's as bad as a lot of the blockchain projects that are working on blockchain tokens or other stuff to do with blockchain, because mining at the end of the day is a cash flow business. Our clients are the mining companies, especially the ones that are the top 10 publicly traded companies that you can see them on the minermag.com as well. They are usually better off than smaller players because they have a leaner operation, they have access to capital markets, and they are the last ones to stop mining when mining difficulty gets worse or the mining profitability decreases, because they have a leaner operation, they have a long-term strategy because they have access to capital markets, they have that liberty to plan for the long term instead of trying to break even ASAP, which is the case for smaller players who are the ones who have to quit mining first when profitability decreases and difficulty goes up. So I think it's kind of more or less the same. That's always been. If you have a leaner operation and you are in it for the longer term, you survive the tough times. Whereas the ones who are in it for a quick buck either already break even very quickly before the market gets bad, or they are not able to do so and they have to quit while the market is bad. So I think that hasn't changed, whether it's 5 years ago or now. And also, of course, 5 years ago, things were very different. You had a lot of individuals who had the capital and they were interested in mining and making a quick buck. And most of them, if not all, were based in Asia. And they were mining in Asia or in China, particularly. But after the Chinese government banned mining about 3 years ago, it's all moved to the US. And now US is the hub of mining. And most of it is done by institutions, not just rich people like it was in China before. Also because the kind of investments that you require now are significantly higher than they used to be 3 or 5 years ago, when someone with access to that much capital could easily do it fairly easily compared to now. Now you do need an institutional scale operation and investors to not only get that kind of capital, but also to hedge your risks, which are way more than they used to be because of how difficult it is to mine now than before.
What do you think of the idea that publicly traded mining companies have sort of changed the incentives of Bitcoin mining because they can access capital markets, like you mentioned, and kind of weather the storm, whereas a privately held mining company might go bust in the normal bull and bear market boom and bust cycle?
That's a good question, because the cause and effect here are kind of cyclical. Because mining, gets halved, the mining rewards get halved every 4 years, mining difficulty keeps rising. As a result, it had to become a longer term play. It couldn't be done the way it was done 5 years ago, when you were a rich person and you could just buy some machines, put them some facility in China at very cheap hosting rates, and break even in less than a year, sometimes even 6 months when prices were high. But as difficulty increased and halving happened, which means the block rewards of mining decrease. It had to become a longer term play. You had to have a strategy in place. And so the companies that are publicly traded and institutions already have that kind of risk analysis built in because they've been doing it in other industries before. They have a long-term strategy in place because they are not in it for just a quick buck. They have investors to answer to. So it's hard to say whether the fact that most of the companies are publicly traded or institutions change the mining industry, or the mining industry's changes, which are inherent and by design, made it such that publicly traded companies are dominating the industry now versus before. So both of these things happened around the same time, and it's cyclical. Can't say what led to the another.
What's your take on the idea that Bitcoin mining is like an inefficient use of energy and therefore it's harmful?
So that is a very often discussed topic on the internet and in the press. And being a public relations consultancy for Bitcoin mining companies, we've discussed it internally, externally. We've thought a lot about it. But I think in the end, it comes down to whether you find Bitcoin valuable or not, or whether you find Bitcoin something useful or not. Because no one can, if you do not find Bitcoin useful, no one can persuade you that it's a good use of energy. Even if it's zero emissions, you would just rather have that energy spent somewhere else, in electronic vehicles, in houses, or wherever you want it, instead of letting it being used by Bitcoin mining companies. Or you would even let it, just sit idle, or rather than being used for Bitcoin mining, because you just think Bitcoin is useless. So no one can persuade you if you think that way, to believe otherwise. And people like myself, and probably you, because you work in the industry, who think Bitcoin is useful, would always believe it's useful, even if sometimes it is emitting harmful gases or damaging the environment to some extent, because you would rather see the long-term benefits, and you would see that the people who are using fossil fuels have a strategy to move towards renewables, and you are waiting for that to happen, because you will just look at it more pragmatically. You would see that, hey, this is not going to be always the case. So, but we are getting the Bitcoin's benefits, and everyone is around the world getting the benefits of Bitcoin, and it is moving towards renewables eventually. So you are more patient rather than more critical about the emissions. Having said that, at BlocksBridge, we try to only work with companies who either mine only with renewables or clean energy, or have a strategy in place to move towards renewables. At the minimum, I believe all publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies, or the companies we work with, are carbon neutral. So they would offset it by purchasing carbon credits. That's the least they're doing. But for sure, everyone's moving towards renewables. That's just more sustainable, not just from the point of view of environment, but also sustainable from the point of view of business, because renewable energy's costs are going down, and it's going to be, in the long term, a better business model than using fossil fuels.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm of the opinion that Bitcoin incentivizes like cleaner energy for the reasons you just stated. Let me switch gears here. What kind of trends do you see for the future of mining hardware? Like, do you just see it like continuing to be like massive warehouses of ASICs, or do you see any sort of evolution as far as like the technology for mining goes on the hardware front?
That's a good question, because if you looked at it, most obvious development would be that the ASICs keep developing, and the process nodes, or the size of each diode in the silicon keeps decreasing. Currently, we are working on the machines in the market use up to 5 nanometer or 7 nanometer process nodes, and the next generation is expected to be 3 nanometer process nodes in the Bitcoin mining world. So that's the most obvious way of development when it comes to Bitcoin mining hardware. But another thing that we're seeing is, because the price hasn't been rising that much, and the life cycle of these machines have increased a lot. So when I joined the industry in 2014, the life cycle of a machine was 3 to 4 months. So which means you launch a new model every 3 to 4 months if you're a miner maker. to survive, because your previous model becomes obsolete in 3 to 4 months after you launch, because mining difficulty was rising exponentially back then, because people were still mining with GPUs or FPGAs, and ASICs were still a new thing. However, now everyone's mining with ASICs, and everyone has like the latest generation. Most of the mining companies, the big ones, use latest generation mining machines, and the difficulty doesn't rise as crazily as it used to back in the day. However, difficulty is at an all-time high, so it's anyway very high. The reason I'm explaining this is because now the life cycle of machines has increased drastically. The life cycle of the S9 was up to 6 years. So expect the latest generation or the current generation to also have a life cycle of at least that much, if not more. So now, how do you get more competitive? Because there is no new generation coming to the market in terms of ASICs. How do you get more competitive? And that's where there has been more innovation happening than ever before in the history of Bitcoin mining. I mean, innovation outside of just going to the next generation of ASICs. And that innovation is happening in many ways. Examples are immersion cooling, liquid cooling, and also design of data centers where machines can operate more efficiently. The heat or the thermodynamics are better taken care of. And yeah, those kind of innovations are making the same ASIC generation of machines more efficient than their peers who do not employ these latest technologies. There's another thing that this opens up. So this innovation also enables you to mine in places you couldn't mine previously. For example, immersion cooling, unlike air-cooled machines, which was the norm about a few years ago, enable you to mine in hot and humid environments, which you couldn't do with air-cooled machines. So now you have mining in Texas, for example, happening at a very large scale where it gets really, really hot. But immersion cooling makes it much easier to mine in such environments. So that's kind of a side effect of all these innovations happening, that it has opened up more geographic area of the world for mining.
Yeah, I guess they would need those kind of machines like to mine in a place like El Salvador, right? What do you think of like the idea of an ASIC in every home? I know a lot of Bitcoiners say that like in the future, every home's going to have an ASIC miner. Do you think we'll ever see like appliances like for the home with built-in ASICs?
Personally, I do not think that's going to happen. The reason is when I joined the space in 2014, I was working for a miner maker in Shenzhen, and we were trying to market these machines to bring back mining to people's homes. So in 2014, it was already a thing out of homes. It was already a thing that was happening in industrialized data centers. And we were trying to do that. And it was already a tough sell, because the problem becomes when you're mining at home, there are considerations like the heat dissipation, the noise, etc., which limit how efficient that machine can be or how profitable that machine can be. And when you try to make it, if you don't care about profitability and efficiency of the machine, then you might as well not have it, because the customer who's buying this product, whatever consumer product you put the chips in, has to pay the price for those chips, but they're not going to get anything in return. So they will always buy your competitor's product, which is a non-mining product, then buy your product, which includes mining, but comes at an extra cost without the benefits, because it's not going to be profitable. That has often been the problem. These problems could be solved if you were working at a very, very large scale. So if you could have like maybe places with centralized governance and a large geographic area, consider a country like China, if they start doing it at the size of cities, and Chinese cities are way larger than cities in the West, then you could, have it in every home. For example, they could have natural heating in homes during, not natural, I mean heating in homes during the winter months using Bitcoin mining. And at the same time, you are the utility provider who's got these machines spread out over the city in so many areas, and it adds up. Even whatever Bitcoins you are able to mine, they all add up, and it becomes a profitable operation over a long period of time. So it could be done on that scale, but scale is smaller, it's hard. And then there's another argument. If you did have a government, a centralized government, because only a centralized government could produce such a project off at such a scale. If you had that kind of a government doing it, then is it even decentralized? It's not like, mining at every home. The first thought that comes to anyone's mind is that it's going to be decentralized because everyone is mining. But then it's not decentralized when you're operating at that scale. So there are various challenges dealing with the philosophy behind it and dealing with the technology behind it, the economics of it, that make it unfeasible. So many people have tried it. There have been theories and some pilots in the past, but nothing worked out. And I entered the industry was solving this challenge, and that was 9 years ago. And so I do not see that changing anytime soon.
Thank you for your perspective. What jurisdictions would you say are the most mining friendly? I know you mentioned Texas is like a huge mining hotspot, but what other places around the globe are like friendly towards mining?
Yeah, not just Texas. Actually, there are a few other states that are quite that encourage mining and who have the business environment and the economic incentives for miners to operate in. Georgia is another state that has been very pro mining, and there have been many successful miners mining there with sustainable energy. Around the world, Russia is a big hub for mining. I believe that after the US, it's Russia, the top mining country. However, unfortunately, because of the invasion of Ukraine, you have Russia cut out from the rest of the world in many ways, including data available to public or including access to those mining facilities. So people in the US, for example, investors in the US are not able to invest in Russia. But yeah, Russia has large-scale mining operations, and they are using only renewable energy because they have excess hydropower from the Soviet times, because Soviet Union built the world's largest hydropower projects back in the day, and they have their cost has been paid off already about decades ago, and now they're just running, and they have also access to some of the largest reservoirs of fresh water. So these are year-round generators of energy. And if you're not using them, you're just wasting that energy. So it's a very good use of energy, I believe. And the environment is perfect for mining too, if you consider air-cooled mining. So that's a good location for mining, but unfortunately, because of geopolitical situation now, Russia is kind of inaccessible to a lot of the world when it comes to mining. So that's one hub. And then there has been some mining activity in Central Asia, but I wouldn't say it's thriving, because there's always these, whenever the government changes or the public starts hating mining, then the government changes their stance. They do a complete 180 from loving mining or encouraging it to banning it. So it's kind of dicey mining in Central Asia. And then another geography that has emerged thanks to access to capital markets that mining has got is South America, because it's kind of a nearby neighbor to USA. And you have some operations happening there. Again, they're also using the business-friendly environment there to set up large-scale mining data centers. And it's also kind of cost-effective to do it there. However, the risks, or not the risk, but the challenges, if you're doing it, become dealing with the local regulations and maybe not such a stable political system as it is in the US. So companies who are able to navigate all that are thriving in South America while mining. And they are mostly foreign companies. I think all of them are foreign companies if they are operations of scale.
Are energy-rich jurisdictions that don't have much mining going on, are they paying attention to like these places where mining is becoming like a well-integrated industry?
So Russia, again, is like one of the best examples that come to my mind, because, like I said, they have excess hydropower. This is surplus hydropower that would just otherwise go waste. And economics makes sense because these hydropower projects cost was paid off long ago, because they are built long ago by the Soviet Union. Other than that, I can't think of any jurisdiction having so much excess energy. Yeah, China is one, but we all know what happened with China, so there's no mining happening there. Yeah, US is kind of unique in that way because most places that you think of, the utility providers is the state. So state owns all the utility companies. But in the US, there's so much playroom for entrepreneurs, for investors to invest in these projects because they are private utility providers. And so you have a lot of this innovation happening in the States. And another, going back to my point about having excess energy. So I was only talking about places that have so much excess energy in one spot. For example, a giant hydropower dam with hundreds of gigawatts of production. But in the US, you don't need to have that because you have so many pockets of stranded energy. Stranded because it's not connected to the national grid or even the state grid. And because of the business environment or the playroom that entrepreneurs have when it comes to energy or the utilities, you have so many. There is a room or possibility of capitalizing on all these stranded pockets of energy and ultimately having Bitcoin mining operations that are using energy that would be wasted otherwise, and of a scale that's as much as a place like Russia or even more. So yeah, I can't think of any other jurisdiction. It's just because everywhere else, it's states own the utilities or the power production.
So like in Texas, where like the ERCOT grid is being, the energy demand is being regulated by the mining industry, and they turn the machines on and off like according to the demands of the grid. It seems to be like working out really well. Are other states like kind of seeing how Texas is monetizing this energy that would otherwise be lost and kind of opening their minds towards doing something similar?
That's a very good point. Thanks for bringing that up. In fact, I was on a panel at Mainnet conference here in New York last week, and this is a point that I brought up because the panel was about the narrative around Bitcoin mining's energy use changing. It's because like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, especially during the last bull market, there was a lot of criticism of the environmental damage of Bitcoin because of its energy use, or just criticism around the energy use of Bitcoin. Now that criticism had disappeared for various reasons that I mentioned on the panel. But one of the reasons I mentioned was you have a pilot that worked out. So the government in Texas placed a bet on Bitcoin mining at a time when it was difficult because Texas grid was infamous for being not the most robust grid because they had the blackouts during the last during the winter in 2021. 2021 winter they had blackouts, and then they still placed a bet on Bitcoin mining, which is you invited these huge consumers of power to come in the state, a state which is known for not having the robust, strong grid. They placed a bet because they saw it as a counterintuitive way to encourage investments in and development of their grid. And that played out very well. And so you have all this data from ERCOT and the utility providers proving that it worked very well. So that has a big role to play in changing the narrative around Bitcoin mining's energy use. And many people see it, the public see it, and that is why I believe, one of the many reasons why I believe the criticism around Bitcoin mining has reduced drastically. Another reason is that there's no bull market now, so people don't care much about complaining about Bitcoin mining's energy use because Bitcoiners or Bitcoin miners are not making as much money as they were during the bull market when people complain more about it. So yeah, the answer to your question is yes, the other states see it, but we haven't seen any state following the same yet because these things take time. They don't happen that fast, especially because the market of the energy market in Texas is deregulated. But in many states of scale and of importance, it is regulated. So it takes a while because the red tapeism to pull off such projects. But it's going to happen, I think, sooner or later because Texas has proven it works.
And then I guess on the flip side of that question, in these places where the energy like companies are state owned, do you ever think we will see like a nation state enter Bitcoin mining due to incentives?
I think it's going to happen sooner or later because the best thing you can do when you have access to a lot of sustainable and low cost energy is convert it to Bitcoin, or the part that you don't need. convert it to Bitcoin. That's very lucrative compared to other things you could do with that energy. So I think it's only a matter of time before you have some nation states doing it. It's also taking time because Bitcoin, is not so loved by governments, especially with all the news that came out from the crypto world last year, including FTX and the fallout. So crypto is kind of rebuilding its reputation since then. So I think that has slowed this process, but it's only a matter of time before governments start seeing the potential benefits for not just making money, but also for generating jobs and creating other kind of wealth for their people.
What about like the petroleum and natural gas industry? Like we hear a lot about them using like the flare gas that just escapes to the atmosphere to like hook up miners and stuff like that. Have you seen that trend like playing out in your interactions with the mining industry?
Yes, so a lot of oil and gas companies are seeing the potential because as you already know, but maybe some readers do not, flare gas is otherwise just a wasted gas that you just have to burn away. And by employing these projects that many companies are working on, where they just take these flare gas stacks and instead of flaring it, they convert it to energy for mining Bitcoin. And they have these modular operations they can put wherever you have these flare gas outlets. So when they do that, they use the emissions or especially the methane gas more thoroughly, more efficiently. So as a result, the harmful substances in the gas being emitted after Bitcoin mining with it happen to be lesser than they would be when you just flare it away, when you just burn that gas away without using it for Bitcoin mining, without using it for anything. So if you have the choice between, just burning that gas away, damaging the planet more, or mining Bitcoin with it, damaging the planet lesser. So you're making money while mining Bitcoin and damaging the planet lesser. Why not do that? So yeah, it's getting traction. There are oil and gas companies that are embracing it. There are governments in the Middle East, in the oil and gas rich states in the Middle East who are experimenting with it and have started pilots with such companies that I mentioned.
Do you see any risk to the mining industry, either through like the diminishing block reward not being replaced by fees on chain, or from like climate concerns and overzealous legislation?
I do not, because I think you answered the question with your first example, which is, the transaction fees, I believe, will eventually replace block rewards. It has consistently been a greater percentage of the block rewards for miners, and it will continue to increase, I believe. There's no reason to believe otherwise. I mean, more people know about Bitcoin today than they knew in the past. So eventually, even if these transactions are happening on centralized exchanges and not on chain, there have to be settlements on the chain. And the more people know about Bitcoin, eventually more people are using it. Transaction fees will only keep increasing, overall for the Bitcoin miners as a reward. So I do not see that as a problem. And the Bitcoin ecosystem, or the Bitcoin by design, Bitcoin system readjusts itself. So when it's not profitable, the difficulty goes down. So because less people start mining it, less people are mining it, the hash rate drops, the difficulty drops. So it readjusts. So I do not think that's going to be a problem in the long term.
Do you think that like climate concerns, like people being scared, like thinking like Bitcoin's harmful, will create like overzealous legislation that could put the mining industry at risk?
I think that is a thing of the past. As I mentioned, I think the narrative around that has taken a 180, and people are beginning to see that it's actually a way to move faster towards a world with mostly renewable energy.
Okay, cool. Well, Nishant, thank you so much for coming on the show and letting me ask you so many questions about mining. It was super informative. Would you like to let people know how they can follow BlocksBridge, how they can follow you, and keep tabs on what you're working on?
Sure. So your viewers can go to BlocksBridge.com, but even better, they can go to theminermag.com and get free data and information, insights, and get a better understanding of what which Bitcoin mining company stocks to buy. And if they want to follow us on social media, it's the Miner Mag with an underscore, the Miner Mag underscore, or BlocksBridge underscore, BLOCKSBRIDGE. You can find us on Twitter or LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, by the way, your users may find our newsletter very useful. We have a free weekly newsletter called the Miner Weekly. So you can subscribe to it at blocksbridge.substack.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed interviewing you.
Thanks, Ricardo. It was a pleasure chatting with you.